What you are about to hear is not just another testimony. It is a warning from heaven itself, delivered through the most unlikely messenger, a man who had lost his faith, lost his sight, and nearly lost his life, only to discover that sometimes God uses our darkest moments to reveal His greatest truths. This is the account of Moshe Kaplan, a Jewish man who encountered Jesus Christ in the space between life and death, and what he saw will shake you to your core. If you are watching this video, it is not by accident. The Spirit has drawn you here for a reason. Before we begin, I ask you to show respect for what you are about to witness. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from so we can pray for your nation. Most importantly, do not turn away from this message, because what Moshe experienced concerns events that are coming sooner than anyone realizes. My name is Moshe Kaplan. I am 40 years old, and until 3 months ago, I lived in complete darkness. Not just the physical darkness that had consumed my world for the past 2 years, but a spiritual darkness that had been growing in my heart for much longer. I was born into a devout Jewish family in Brooklyn. My father was a rabbi, my grandfather before him, and his father before that. The Torah was not just our holy book, it was our life, our breath, our very identity. For 38 years, I walked faithfully in the traditions of my fathers. I observed every festival, kept every commandment, studied the ancient texts with the fervor of a scholar and the devotion of a believer. But then came the accident that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning in March, 2 years ago. I was driving to the synagogue for morning prayers when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my car at 50 miles per hour. When I woke up in the hospital 3 days later, the doctors delivered news that shattered my world. The impact had caused severe trauma to my optic nerves. I would never see again. The light had gone out of my life, literally and figuratively. In the months that followed, I struggled not just with learning to navigate a world without sight, but with questions that tormented my soul. How could Hashem, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, allow this to happen to one of His faithful servants? Where was the justice in a righteous man losing his sight while the wicked prospered? Slowly, bitterness crept into my heart like poison. I stopped attending synagogue. I stopped studying Torah. I stopped praying. My wife Sarah watched helplessly as the man she married disappeared into an abyss of anger and despair. My children, David and Rachel, learned to tiptoe around their father's rage. I had become a stranger in my own home, a shadow of the man I once was. 3 months ago, on a cold December morning, I reached my breaking point. The darkness in my soul had become unbearable. I could no longer see the point of living in a world where God had abandoned me. I had made a decision that fills me with shame even now. I was going to end my life. I waited until Sarah had taken the children to school. Then I went to the medicine cabinet and took every pill I could find. As the medication began to take effect, I felt a strange peace wash over me. The constant pain in my heart was finally subsiding. I lay down on our bed and closed my eyes, ready to escape from a world that had become too cruel to bear. But as consciousness began to slip away, something extraordinary happened. The darkness that had been my constant companion for 2 years suddenly gave way to the most brilliant light I had ever seen. I found myself standing in a place that defied description. It was not a location in any earthly sense, but a realm where time and space seemed to bend to the will of something far greater than human understanding. The light that surrounded me was not harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming, like the embrace of a loving father. And in that light, I saw Him. He was not what I expected. Growing up Jewish, I had been taught that Jesus was either a false Messiah or, at best, a misguided teacher. But the figure standing before me radiated an authority and love that could only come from the divine. His eyes held the wisdom of eternity, yet they looked at me with the tenderness of someone who had known me since before I was born. "Moshe," he said, and his voice resonated through every fiber of my being. "You have lost your way, my son, but I have not lost you." I wanted to speak, to ask the 1,000 questions that flooded my mind, but I found myself unable to form words. Instead, I simply stood there, overwhelmed by his presence, feeling simultaneously completely exposed and completely safe. "I know your pain," he continued. "I know the darkness that has consumed your heart. I know the questions that have tormented your soul, but I have brought you here not to judge you, but to show you something that will change not only your life, but the lives of countless others. What you are about to see has been hidden from the foundation of the world, but the time has come for it to be revealed." As he spoke, the space around us began to shift and change. I realized that I was not just seeing with my physical eyes, which had been useless for 2 years, but with spiritual sight that penetrated beyond the veil of earthly reality. What I witnessed next would haunt and inspire me for the rest of my days. The first vision began to unfold before me like a scroll being opened. I saw the earth, but not as it appears today. It was convulsing, shaking with an intensity that made the strongest earthquakes seem like gentle tremors. Mountains were crumbling, oceans were rising, and the very foundations of the world appeared to be giving way. But this was not just physical upheaval. There was something spiritual happening simultaneously, something that made the physical destruction seem almost insignificant by comparison. I saw people everywhere, billions of them, but they were not responding to the chaos around them as I would have expected. Instead of panic and fear, I witnessed 2 distinct reactions. Some people had a light about them, a peace that transcended their circumstances. They moved with purpose and confidence, helping others, praying, worshiping even as the world collapsed around them. But others, the vast majority, seemed to be in a state of complete spiritual darkness. They were not just afraid of the physical destruction, they were experiencing a terror that came from somewhere much deeper. Jesus stood beside me as I watched this unfold. "This is the first event," he said, "the great shaking that will separate those who truly know me from those who merely claim to know me. What you see happening to the earth is only the outward manifestation of what is happening in the spiritual realm. The foundations of everything that man has built apart from me will be shaken until only what is built on the rock of my truth remains." I watched in amazement as entire cities crumbled, yet certain buildings stood firm. I saw governments fall, economies collapse, and institutions that had seemed permanent vanish like smoke. But through it all, there were these people who remained unshaken, not because they were protected from the physical effects, but because their foundation was not of this world. As this vision continued, I began to understand something profound. The shaking was not just destruction, it was purification. It was separating the wheat from the chaff, the real from the counterfeit, the eternal from the temporal. And I realized that this was not something distant and theoretical. This was coming soon, very soon. The second vision began to materialize as the first one faded, and what I witnessed next shook me to my very core. I saw a great deception spreading across the earth like a plague. It was not carried by wind or water, but by voices, by images, by messages that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere at once. People were gathering in massive crowds, their faces turned upward not to heaven, but to screens, to speakers, to figures who promised them peace and safety. But Jesus showed me the truth behind this deception. These were not messengers of hope, but servants of darkness disguised as angels of light. They spoke of unity, of tolerance, of a new age of human enlightenment. They promised solutions to every problem, answers to every question, healing for every wound. Yet, as I watched with spiritual eyes, I could see that behind their beautiful words was a poison that was slowly killing the souls of those who listened. The most terrifying part was how many people who called themselves believers were falling for this deception. I saw pastors abandoning their pulpits to embrace these false teachers. I saw rabbis like my own father setting aside the Torah to follow these new prophets. I saw entire congregations leaving their houses of worship to join these massive gatherings where the name of God was never mentioned, yet everyone felt deeply spiritual. "This is the second event," Jesus said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The great deception that will test the hearts of all who claim to follow the truth. Many will be deceived because they love the approval of men more than the approval of God. They will choose comfort over conviction, popularity over truth, unity over righteousness." I watched as this deception spread like wildfire, consuming entire nations. What made it so powerful was not just its lies, but how it mixed truth with falsehood, making it nearly impossible for the spiritually immature to distinguish between them. It promised everything that people wanted to hear while quietly stealing away everything that truly mattered. But even in this darkness, I saw beacons of light. There were those who refused to be deceived, who stood firm in their faith even when it cost them everything. They were mocked, persecuted, cast out from society, yet they held fast to the truth. And I understood that these were the ones who would be ready for what was coming next. As the visions began to fade, Jesus turned to me with eyes that held both infinite love and urgent concern. "Moshe," he said, "you have seen what is coming upon the earth. These events will begin soon, sooner than most people realize. The shaking has already started in small ways, but it will intensify until no one can ignore it. The deception is already spreading, but it will become so powerful that even the elect would be deceived if it were possible. I have shown you these things not to frighten you, but to prepare you. You must return to your life, but not as the same man who left it. You must tell others what you have seen. You must warn them to prepare their hearts, to build their lives on the foundation that cannot be shaken. Many will not believe you, but some will listen, and those who listen will be ready." "But Lord," I said, finding my voice at last, "I am blind. I have lost my faith. I have failed as a husband, as a father, as a servant of the Most High. How can I be your messenger? Who will believe the testimony of a broken man?" Jesus smiled, and in that smile, I saw the same compassion that he had shown to doubting Thomas, to denying Peter, to persecuting Saul. "My son," he said, "I do not call the qualified, I qualify the called. Your blindness will become sight. Your brokenness will become wholeness. Your failure will become testimony. I will give you words to speak and courage to speak them, and those who have ears to hear will recognize the truth, not because of who you are, but because of who I am." As he spoke these words, I felt something changing within me. The bitterness that had poisoned my heart for 2 years began to dissolve. The anger that had consumed me was replaced by a love so profound I could barely contain it, and though my physical eyes remained dark, I could see with perfect clarity the path that lay ahead. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the vision ended. I found myself back in my bedroom, but something was different. The pills I had taken should have killed me, but instead I felt more alive than I had in years. My wife Sarah was shaking me, crying, begging me to wake up. When I opened my eyes and spoke her name, she collapsed in relief. What happened next changed everything. As I sat up in bed, I began to tell Sarah about my encounter with Jesus. At first, she was horrified, thinking that the medication had caused hallucinations. But as I spoke, something in my words, something in my voice, convinced her that this was real. I was no longer the bitter, angry man who had tried to end his life. I was transformed. Over the following days, I could not stop talking about what I had experienced. I called my father, my brother, my friends from the synagogue. Some hung up on me. Others accused me of having a mental breakdown. But a few listened, and in their listening, I saw the same light that I had witnessed in the vision. I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days before. I asked Sarah to take me to a Christian church as we sat in that sanctuary. Listening to the pastor speak about the love of Jesus, I felt the presence of the Lord just as powerfully as I had in the vision. When the pastor gave an invitation to accept Christ, I raised my hand without hesitation. That day, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. I am still Jewish by birth, but I am Christian by choice. I am still blind in my physical eyes, but I can see spiritual truth more clearly than ever before. I am still broken in many ways, but I am being made whole by the love of God. Now I spend my days doing what Jesus commanded me to do. I am warning everyone who will listen about the events that are coming. The great shaking is beginning. The great deception is spreading. But there is hope for those who will turn to Jesus Christ, who will build their lives on the foundation of His truth. I know that many of you watching this are skeptical. I know that my story sounds impossible. But I beg you, do not dismiss this message because of the messenger. Look at the signs around you. Look at the chaos in the world, the confusion in the church, the deception that is spreading like wildfire. These are not random events. They are the beginning of what I was shown. The time for preparation is now. The time for decision is now. Do not wait until the shaking becomes so violent that you cannot stand. Do not wait until the deception becomes so powerful that you cannot discern the truth. Turn to Jesus Christ today. Build your life on the foundation that cannot be moved. Prepare your heart for what is coming. I have delivered the message that was given to me. What you do with it is between you and God. But I pray that you will not ignore this warning. I pray that you will be among those who are ready when these events begin to unfold. And I pray that when the shaking comes, you will be found standing firm on the rock of Jesus Christ. Thank you for listening to my testimony. Thank you for allowing me to share what the Lord has shown me. If this message has touched your heart, please share it with others. Subscribe to this channel to hear more testimonies like this one. And most importantly, do not delay in making your decision for Christ. Time is shorter than you think. May God bless you and keep you in the days ahead. May He open your spiritual eyes to see the truth, and may He prepare your heart for the glorious return of our Lord Jesus Christ.